Thank you so much to our amazing panelists for joining, and to the folks who are on the line. For our attendees, I would love to start, even though we cannot see your faces, I would love to start by learning a little bit more about you so we can make sure that the conversation is a bit tailored. So Matt, if you could actually launch the poll, would love to just hear a little bit more about you, sort of what your role is, what your interaction with retail media is today, and what kind of retail media you're buying if you buy retail media. Ooh, so I suppose since we did CTV, Offsite is getting a good showing here. And I see a number of agencies, which is great. So very much interested to hear your Q&As as we move through. And so just as we think about the structure today, again, you can see our faces, we cannot see yours, but I hope that this is a very interactive panel. So please do throw any questions into the chat. Matt can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there is a Q&A part of this. We will try and leave about 15 minutes at the end for either those Q&As you put in the chat or for you guys to ask live questions if that is possible with our technology. But overwhelmingly seeing about half our agencies and a smaller proportion brands, so about 60% retail media buyers. A few RMNs, and then again, similar, it sounds similar. The people who are potential buyers are mostly buying retail media today, and it looks like you're actually buying quite a bit across the product types. So let's share those results so that we can all get to know each other a little bit better. To kick off now for the faces. So I am Leora Kelman. I'm a managing director and partner at Boston Consulting Group, and I lead our retail media and commerce media topic. I am honored to be joined by the other faces on this Zoom, and I would ask each of them to introduce themselves. So maybe Brady Bunch style, starting in the order I see you. So Steve, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I'm Steve Biddle. I formerly was at Meta. I ran retail media at Meta for the last 3 of my 14 years there. I semi-retired earlier this summer, but staying certainly close to the retail media conversation outside of that. No other icebreaker, huh, Leora?
We're gonna do icebreakers
Can't
next. So do
wait.
you want me to? We
Nope,
can
Mr.
begin.
Parbs. I'll pass it over to Mr. Parbs right now.
All right.
All right. I thought you were going to pass it over with an icebreaker, but clearly didn't. The Parbs, I have the pleasure of leading the team at CBS Media Exchange, CMX, with the retail media network for CBS Health. Been here for around about 3 years now, and love leading the charge on this team and building not just change for what we're doing here at CVS Health, but change in the way in which we think about the industry and the coming together of the industry. But thanks for having me, Leora.
Fantastic. And Todd.
Yes, my name is Todd Bergey. I'm president at Allebach Communications. We're a agency that focuses on food and beverage specifically, and in my 23rd year here. So it's been my almost my whole career here. So appreciate it.
Amazing. I love that we have so many agency participants because I feel like that's constantly a conversation in the retail media space. So now the aforementioned icebreaker that Steve was so excited for, and I should disclose that I am stealing this from someone else. It was the icebreaker on a panel I was on, which was, what inning is retail media in? If retail media is a baseball game or a cricket game, Parbs, I don't know. What inning is retail media in? And then for you personally in your role, what inning do you feel like you're in that game? So let's do same order as last time. Steve, kick us off, and then I'll switch it up for the next question.
I think a year ago I would have said we're still in like the second inning, but we're not there anymore. I think we're in the top of the fifth. And here's why I think that. I think in the early the early part of the game, you've got the powerhouses that have been established, the Yankees and the Dodgers. You've got the Walmarts and the Targets that have been established, and now you have the rest of the field that is sort of basically set, which is the other 250 that are there. And I think in the early innings, it's really about establishing your presence. It's about establishing, your basic processes. And it was ugly at times. It was about sizing up the other side, right? And it was the first time you had the pitch, and so you had the retail media network sizing up the brands the other way around. The retail media networks were minimizing risk. They were keeping things as house as much as possible. But you know what? Now, in the fifth inning, it's your second time up to bat. You're making adjustments. You're making changes. Heck, you even have management asking for more. They were so hungry with the 6 runs they got in the first inning that they want the 6 runs like every inning.
Every
Maybe
inning?
want 7 runs in like the 5th inning. And the reality is it's not happening. It's not possible because really the adjustments are getting made. And so that's why I think, we're sort of in the middle of the game. And quite frankly, it's super exciting to be in the middle of the game. It's not just hype. It's just, there's a lot of stuff to still figure out. So that's why I would position it as the top of the 5th.
Amazing. Parbs, what do you think?
Yeah, look, I'll go with your baseball analogy, even though I know nothing about the sport. But I would say we're in the 4th innings, bottom of the 4th innings, and we're halfway point. I think there's 2 things that are happening here. There's where I would say the retail media networks know that they are, and then I believe that there's a perception from brands as to where we. And I think there's a difference there. And the difference there is over the past, to really building on Steve's point, over the past couple of years, retail media networks have been investing significantly in the medium and investing significantly in the platform. Is it complete? Is it perfect? I don't think so. But are the foundations laid for real scale and growth over the course of the next 2 years? Absolutely. Brands are, I would say, not all brands, I don't want to bucket all brands the same, but brands are playing a little bit of catch up because they understand, because they've been told, they understand that there's impact with retail media. They don't fully understand the impact of retail media. And I'm not just talking about, in our instance, what's the impact of CMX across CVS, but what's the impact of CMX across the total market? How are we growing total category, total market, with the level of data and understanding of the consumer that there's not too many platforms out there that can provide that. And that is a real game changer. And as soon as brands really lean into how some of the retail media networks and the work that's been happening over the course of the last couple of years can help them over the course of the next 3, 4, 5 years to really grow, then there will be that inflection point, and we'll accelerate through the innings, so to speak. So I think there's a lot of great work that's been done across the industry as a whole, and we're now going to realize that net effect.
Well, that's a great transition to Todd as one of the buyers of retail media. Where does this feel like we are to you?
Yeah, I'm pretty close to these guys. I think we're in the bottom of the 3rd. I think we've been through the lineup once, and now we're really starting to get deeper into figuring it out. And from a brand perspective and an agency perspective, there's just so much to learn and to translate. Not everyone on the brand side fully understands, and quite honestly, it continues to change. And changing is always isn't bad. The platforms have gotten more enhanced. The strategy has gotten more enhanced. So being able to understand it at the brand level through the agency, we have to first know it really, really well. We have to translate it over to them, and they have to feel comfortable enough to sell this internally. And
Yeah.
without feeling like they're going to be left with a question that they have no idea how they're going to answer it. So I think we're in the 3rd. I feel like the other context is who's the pitcher, who's the batter here, And but I feel like the agency is more so we're pitching it to our clients, because they're the ones, they're not staying as up to date on this, nor should they have to. The agency should be doing that for them. And then obviously having partners that really help us understand it. So I'd say we're in that third, fourth. I think we're all in the same area. The other thing I would say is I don't know how many innings there are in this game. Could we, what does it look like? Boy, 5 years ago it didn't look like this. 3 years ago it didn't look like this. So how many innings, typical ball games, 9 innings, but are we going to be looking at 15, 16 innings down as this continues to progress? So it's exciting to be in the industry. It's exciting to have something that's as I guess you would say, it's just continuing to grow. The momentum is there. And so obviously keeping that momentum going even with our clients and the brands that we help serve. So that's where I'd say we are.
So it sounds like there's a lot of alignment. There was somewhere in the middle of the baseball game.
Yeah.
I do think Parbs and Todd, you were close, but it is interesting of Parbs, you're saying, hey, maybe we're at the RMNs, we are in a slightly different place than our buyers think we are, and getting that communication. I also really liked the point a few of you made around, we've gone through the batters once. And when we look at our poll results, actually, it's a really diverse set of products, ad products that our attendees are buying, which makes sense because we're here to talk about CTV, which is kind of a next phase in retail media. So one of the things that you hear a lot right now is that the days of retail media's easy money are coming to an end, especially as we think about that money that was more trade or shopper focused.
Mhm.
How does this affect where retail media is headed? How can channels like CTV shape that and determine how many innings we're going to have?
Mhm.
Parbs, do you want to kick us off there?
Yeah, I don't mind, and just sort of building on what's been said, I think Todd, you're absolutely right that the momentum's there, and we're going to see continued growth in this sector, and there's going to be disruption as well as we continue to build. We don't fully understand the role that AI is going to play. We don't fully understand how brands view retail media networks as full funnel opportunities. There's still some work to do there, and that will continue to get us ahead of steam. I think over the next 2 to 3 years, what you'll see retail media networks really evolving into full funnel platforms. We're already seeing that with a couple of the larger platforms, but I think you'll see that much more across the board, and the performant nature of the application, the performant nature of what retail media is doing is a really good way of having that as a baseline to think about how we extend into other channels. So obviously CTV is a channel that's going to drive performance for retail, and more importantly for brands at full funnel. But I think there's a general consensus on how we think about full funnel and offsite, and CTV being one of them, but also other constituents, other channels too, such as social. Social retail media really becomes the activation point for social. When you've had these hard, tall walled gardens that have been present for quite some time, retail media and the transactional data, as well as the relationship that we have with our consumers, really helps bring some of those walled gardens down. It provides that level of attribution to brands that has not necessarily been available before, and the technology allows that. But going back to the innings and the baseball question, if you haven't done the work in order to really re-platform and build the right data sets, and more importantly, the way in which you understand your consumer through your platform, then it's gonna prove difficult. So we've seen that. We've seen some success with Pinterest. We just launched some beta partnerships with Reddit. We see offsite and CTV being part of that as a real core constituent to helping drive that full funnel over the next 2 to 3 years.
And Steve, from the tech players side, how do you think about that and the role of offsite in this growth of retail media?
Yeah, first, uh, I think I love the way you position that, Parbs. For those that don't know Parbs as I do, he's one of a small handful of leaders in the media network space that are like real pioneers.
Yes.
You know what I mean? What I mean by that is that this industry is moved forward because of tension. And for those that are on the line, on the agency side, and on the brand side, and the retail media network side, you understand this tension. You do, right? And there's no real clear path past this tension except to work through it. In a couple of specific examples, obviously, we all know that retail media networks provide just unbelievable margin for these retailers, and it's a wonderful business for them. And they have to keep that in mind. It's not just about the performance, although performance really matters. That matters so much to you brands. And the agencies are trying to understand how to do both perfectly. So that tension, and how do you resolve that tension over time? It gets to a little bit of what Parbs is pushing as well, which is the idea of lowering the walls of these walled gardens is happening. I can speak that from Meta standpoint, there was no data out post Cambridge Analytica. There was a tremendous shutdown of how that data was going to be used properly in the market for the benefit of the end advertiser, the retailer, and the end consumer. How can that data surface in a way that's safe, that allows the retail media networks in particular to grow? You need this sort of level playing field in order for the socials of the world, the connected TVs of the world to succeed. You need to be able to understand with trusted measurement how your campaigns are performing, and it's working hand in hand with the retail media networks and the agencies and the brands to make that work.
So Todd, as a buyer, why would you use sort of a retail media network and their first party data to activate something like CTV or social versus going to the social platforms themselves or the CTV platforms themselves? What advantage does it offer to you?
The advantage to us is incredibly deeper. Especially with brands of different sizes, as in our instance, we're working with brands that have maybe launched their first product. We're also working with brands, their legacy brands that are innovating with new products. So there's a big difference between the two and the scale at which they're going to go after their business. A brand that gets into their first retailer versus a brand that is, across the United States, very different. But to be able to take a brand new product in brand new distribution and take a full funnel approach, obviously the walled meta universe is still kind of strange to how we get over that wall, but we see there's some triggers inside of these platforms that allow us to start connecting the dots. All those things to say, the flexibility and the scalability to go after a specific retailer in even, the whole idea of going at a DMA level or well, now you can say, yeah, this is where we are, but we only want this retailer and we only want people that are buying in this category. And we want people that are buying these other brands that we want to steal market share to. Who doesn't want that, right? So to have that, and then to have that at not just CTV, but audio and display and all of these things to create that omni-channel approach, staying in the same audience pool against that retailer data, that's what we've been waiting for a long time. And I'll be honest with you, I never thought in my career, I've been in it for a while, I didn't know that I would ever see it. So to see it now is, to be able to talk to a brand that just got into 200 stores or 50 stores and say, we can get you in front of your audience. We can move velocity, all of these things that, we were hoping to do. And we were strategic in how we tried to do that based on interests and other things. But now we're getting down to that level that's just incredibly tactical and precision, I guess is the word I would use. More than anything for us as an agency, the reality that we're spending clients' money as efficiently and effectively as possible, because nobody stays with an agency if they don't grow. So to know that we're really zeroing in on, hey, this is really going to move the needle, or it gives you the most opportunistic way to move the needle for your brand, it puts the agency in a much better place. So, but with all of that, then you have all of the, all of the, not everything is the same type of data readout, and there's a lot of all that going on. So yeah, there's a lot of excitement for sure.
Can I just build on that real quickly, Leora? Because I think, Todd, you hit on some really interesting points, and we often talk about this, and even in retail media, I don't think all retail media is created equal. And the reason why all retail media is not created equal is because often what happens in some retailers is that there's signal loss. And signal loss can happen in a number of different ways. A customer moves from a digital environment to a physical environment, and there's no way of capturing that consumer, because that consumer may pay with a non-traceable tender, or a customer is within a digital environment, not in a logged in state, moves into a physical environment, and so on. There's many different ways in which you lose data signal. And the reason why all retail media is not created equal is because there needs to be a through line. There needs to be a through line on how you truly understand the consumer, regardless of what transactable medium that they're using, regardless of what sort of tender they're using in order to transact, regardless of where they're transacting. You've got to be able to have a through line. And that's where loyalty really comes into effect. And you're seeing retail media platforms really lean into driving more loyalty, and more importantly, driving loyalty adoption, right? We see that across a lot of retailers. We have that at CVS, and the signals that we get on that consumer right the way through from a physical as well as a digital perspective are second to none. And that enables us to then drive a much more a better understanding, a more rounded understanding of the consumer. Because guess what? The consumer doesn't always shop in digital, and they don't always shop in physical, and it's really dependent on category or need state. And we're now utilizing those data signals, which are best in class, and with the frequency of purchase at CVS, and we have them at mass, right? We have 90 million of those extra care consumers, and we've done a lot of work to understand who those consumers are. When you couple that with CTV, or you couple that with social, or you couple that with whatever medium, even some of our in-store tactics, you drive performance, because you have a very clear understanding of the consumer, you know when they're ready to purchase, and you can deliver a message to them at that right time with the right message. So it's I think this is a really interesting topic for retailers to think about, agencies to think about, and brands to think about how they utilize these signals.
Well, since we're at the halfway point, I want to inject a little tension. So, Steve, you spent a lot of your career working for Meta, which I think claims, oh, I can target at the DMA level, and I know the users so well, and I can get them their cat leggings that nobody knew that they wanted. Defend your honor. Defend the honor of the CTV and social platforms on their own. Or don't, and just tell us retail media is the future.
No, I'll do that. But I do want to offer some advice post Parb's thought there. Not everyone has not every CVS, not every RMN has the quality and quantity of loyalty data. When they do not have that Caremark level of whatever percentage you have, which is an enviable number, I would suggest to those on the call to really question the methodology for the modeling that accounts for that lack of clear through line. Just a point of advice. Okay. On Meta, look, first party data has its role. We all know the role. The role supported the value proposition of closed loop measurement. And if that value proposition wasn't extremely valuable, you wouldn't have 250 RMNs doing this. Okay, so there is a necessary through line to have that first party data. That being said, incrementality has certainly been the greatest buzzword of RMN for the last year and a half too. And understanding that incrementality only comes from the known customer is certainly a tricky proposition, right? That's not always the case, even though an existing customer expanding the basket is easier than getting a new customer. I've been in retail a long time, I know that. But not all incrementality happens with that first party audience that they know. So it is of the benefit to the brands and the retailers for RMN growth to move to offsite channels that use machine learning, that know signals and have an understanding of what people are seeing, watching, of interest in the moment, that a retailer could never have. And partnering with these retailers, social platforms like Meta, use their machine learnings to get, ideally these new customers that drive incremental purchases that get measured in trusted ways. So I think it's a combination of the two, and it's not necessarily one versus another. I would say that Meta, you will have seen that they are not talking about custom audiences as much as they did years ago. That's not what they talk about anymore. They talk about the signals and the ability for the machines to be able to identify the right performing, driving outcomes. And they do a good job of that.
Mhm.
And I wonder if there's also a piece where it depends on the size of your brand and who you're trying to target. Todd, I imagine for a lot of your brands, even reaching those 90 million customers that Parbs already has maybe represents a lot of growth versus if you're Procter and Gamble and you're already reaching kind of everyone, it may be more about the sort of nuance and the signals and the lookalikes.
I mean, the whole metasphere, if you will, what we look at is where consumers, where are their eyeballs, and you cannot take away from the consumption of both of those platforms. So you have to make sure that yes, all this retail media is exceedingly, tactical and very, very practical and very efficient. But you can't walk away from what people are doing in their free time and what they enjoy to do. And so both of these platforms, as there are others that are just consuming way more hours, like it's easy to sit down with these platforms and say, I'm only going to spend 5 minutes here. But that's not how it ends. So it definitely is a part of the media mix for sure when you're looking at an omni-channel approach. But if you were asking me and if I was a brand and I only had a specific amount of money to spend and I was going after distribution in a specific retailer, the social platforms would be something I would layer onto, but it wouldn't be the guiding light. It would be more in the CTV, all of these areas where I can apply all that data. Again, going down to that efficiency and effectiveness model, but don't overlook, this is where consumers are spending their time, right? This is where their eyeballs are. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, we can spend 40 minutes in 5 minutes on these platforms.
So, Todd, you've spoken a few times and referenced, you work with a lot of emerging or challenger brands who may have very different needs from larger advertisers. I would love to hear your perspective on what you and your brands and maybe some of the agencies on this line might need from RMNs that might be different than what some of the largest advertisers need.
I think, you have to think of it, to me, it's in a holistic approach. The RMNs, that's a lot of it's almost like the cost to do business to be in their networks for sure. But I also see the need for this offsite piece of it as well. So from a brand perspective, I wouldn't say if you had to say it's one or the other, you definitely want to stick to the retail, that retail brand data set if you can. If you were doing one or the other, but now you can do both. You can find those data sets elsewhere, especially in the CTV. And I think one of the things the CTV brings to it, and this is where the education comes in. Whenever you mention TV, whether there's a C in front of it or whatever, it happens very quickly with brand managers that they go right to what TV used to be and how it was purchased and even the strategy in which you get to where you're going to go. And now it's a whole nother educational piece. And depending on who they're speaking to within their organization, they also got to get somebody else off of that chair that they were so used to. And I'll give for instance, we're we were working with a brand, and our brand manager was watching TV with her daughter logged in as her, and her husband was downstairs logged in as him with his son. They were both watching the Phillies in the playoffs, and she screamed down to him, "Hey, do you see our ad? Do you see our ad?" It was playing on her TV because she was logged in under her. He did not see that same spot in the same house because he was logged in under him. So that's what I'm saying. There's to say one or the other. I mean, obviously budget comes in and all those things come into play, but the depth and the wealth that we have as marketers now to help out even a smaller brand or a larger brand is exceptional. I don't know if that even answered the question. I kind of went off of that, I think.
Well, but it was a great answer.
All
I
right.
think one of the questions for and I know we have mostly agencies on here, but I think agencies, you guys probably know in the retail media space, there's all this thinking about where's the new growth coming from, right? And what you see at the Googles or the Facebooks is there is a large portion and tooling and teams that are dedicated to those smaller brands.
Mhm.
And so I think a big question is how retail media taps into that growth as well, which we're seeing at Amazon and starting to see at Walmart, but rarely elsewhere. And so I guess, Steve, what are some of the sort of tips of the trade of how you really serve those SMBs and those emerging and challenger brands?
Yeah, and I'll have to say that scale and for RMNs to scale seems like just get a self-service tool up and going. I'll tell you what, it is not as simple as it sounds. It's not just that.
No.
Okay, there are how do you make it profitable? I mean, the economics of it all is something to consider, and not to go into the detail there, but the reality is that look, as a small challenger brand, you don't have as many resources as the Procter and Gamble's of the world. You need the simplest possible way for you to be able to execute and tap into that wonderful, valuable first-party audience and get measurement that you've never seen before. It needs to be so incredibly simple, and simple is the hardest thing in the world to do, right? So, if I think what's happening though, back to the fourth or fifth inning, whatever you want to call it, it's actually happening right now. There are plenty of RMNs who are trying to understand what does a basic package look like? What is the MV, the minimal viable product campaign actually have to accomplish? And what reporting will you actually get? To get to that point, there's a lot of work happening right now to get there. And so I'd say on the very near horizon, you're going to see a lot more RMNs. I mean, like you said, it's even not, you would think that even Walmart, with all the resources in the world, could execute this. And it's with all the resources that they have, it is still not simple to do. But I think it's coming over the next, I'd say 12 to 18 months. Parbs is closer, so he would know even more than me.
I don't know if that was an introduction for me, or you're asking me for a reveal, Steve. I'm not.
I don't think I'm too off.
There's no reveal. There's no reveal. I think the other piece that I would add on all of this is how do you really understand the data signals and, more importantly, drive hyper-targeted audiences for some of these challenger brands? That's one piece. The other piece is what's the right channel for them? Because if you think about our own O&O, our owned and operated, is a very different consumer with a different mindset versus a consumer who sees a targeted CMX ad on CTV versus a consumer who sees an ad in our stores, right? They're all very different mindsets. And I think the challenge, understanding what the challenger brands and some of these smaller SMB brands want to do and how they want to achieve growth is really the driver of the channel and the driver of the type of audiences and the signals that you build in order to enable them to grow at your retail outlet. And I think that's, it's just basic sort of the 101s of advertising, of how you drive successful performing campaigns.
Well, and so I'll do one last question, and then hopefully the audience can share some of their questions or thoughts with us. But we talked about new brands as a source of growth for retail media. New products like CTV are as well. how do we think about how to measure the success of those, how to optimize for them, tips and tricks to make this work as well as possible to drive that performance that Todd, you've really emphasized over and over is so important for your clients?
Yeah, just working with partners that you have data, they're providing it to you, they're providing it into a way that you can use it. Um, that to us is most important. I know there's a lot of platforms as was mentioned, that's more of the user side where you set it up, but working with a partner that they have the strategist behind the as well as the operation behind it, that because with an agency, this isn't what I do, and this isn't the only thing that our agency does. And the folks that are that are from agencies here, I mean, we've got creative, we've got account managers, so just this one issue, working with a group that really can help you and educate you and shepherd you and help you optimize, calibrate campaigns, because I would love to say that I know it as well as, as well as some of the guys on this call even. I know it as well as that I've been informed, but I believe I know it pretty well because I have to then translate that. So I think that's a very important piece, is making sure that you're not just we don't ever want to be a student with our brand's money. We want to be a
Right.
professional with our brand's money. So being with the right people at the right time is, especially now, because like we said, if we're in the third inning, we need to know that we need the manager to get us through the ninth or the 15th. So we're going to need more help as we go, for sure.
Steve, what would you say as how to make the most of this channel, including these emerging channels like CTV?
Parbs mentioned it with their partnership with Pinterest, but the clean room measurement is coming. Okay, it's going to come. There may not be any announcements in the market, but it's probably going to come. And and it would behoove you listening to understand the dynamics of a third-party data clean room. How do the queries work? How is it that you're able to sort of see and validate the queries that go into that clean room? And the reason that's important is because you're going to be able to measure across channels really for the first time in a way that is going to allow you to see what works, work with the retail media network on, optimizing what worked best, and sort of go from there. This all begins with transparency, and transparency is spreading across the industry. And transparency, from Steve Biddle's perspective, is healthy. It's healthy for everyone to have the appropriate amount of data to make the best decisions. So I think if you're not a retail media network, your continued request for greater transparency and your better understanding of how measurement works in an advanced state, no matter how big or small of a brand you work with, this should be a technology that's available over time to everyone.
I love that. Parbs, wrap us up.
Yeah, Steve's right on the nail, right? Like with everything that he just said. I think the transparency piece is key. Providing full metrics of attribution and incrementality is important. The transparency and aligning to the industry standards that are out there, and ensuring that when you're providing an incremental ROAS or any kind of incremental reach metric, that it's aligned to how the industry measures you. Those metrics are in the market and they should be used. So I think those are going to be the key to how this business continues to thrive and grow and be successful. But yeah, I'm right on to both what Todd and Steve are saying.
All right. I'm not seeing any questions in the Q&A, but I think I have confirmed that I can allow folks to talk. So if you have any hand raises, I would love to hear from our wonderful attendees. Otherwise, I'm going to talk about measurement, standardization, and fragmentation, and no one else wants to hear that. questions? Giving it a moment. No one wants it to be their moment in the sun. I will ask my one last one around standardization, but I would encourage, and we can wrap a little bit early, but I am curious because you've talked a little bit about this transparency and measurement in these pieces. Do you think that standardization of measurement is coming? Do you think that will accelerate adoption of retail media? What do we think is happening? And the measurement has been the watchword for probably going on 4 or 5 years now. And maybe Todd, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Measurement. I mean, I feel like just from a perspective of what we used to be able to do and what we used to be able to read, I think we're way ahead. But as soon as you get way ahead, just like you said, everybody wants, well, can you slice it this way, this way, this way? So I think we're in a really good place when you're considering ad dollars and what you're doing on these platforms and where you're investing it. As a brand, we're able to see a lot more with the campaigns that we look at. We're able to see a lot more than we've ever been able to see. I mean, you used to have to look at, kind of these things that were proxies of how your campaigns were doing, and an MMX report, is a forecast, if you will, or a proxy. Where now, we're going on to dashboards and we're saying, okay, we've been in the market this campaign has been live for 4.5 weeks. We can see everything, within 48 hours of data flowing through it. So that part of it is incredible. The other thing that I would say that we tend to have to deal with is not every data point is as valuable as the rest of the data points. So establishing what the KPIs you're going to use, just like doing research, not every piece of research defines what you can or will do. And I think same thing here. There's so many, I mean, you get on some of these platforms and you get so much data back, and it's almost like, wow, what's the number one thing I should be looking at? So clearly articulating that with your clients as you're going in as to what those primary KPIs would be. And then last but not least, that I would say as it relates to the data, data is ones and zeros. It always will be. Where insights come in is humanity has to apply to that. And having a good partner that can take all of that data, yes, I mean, we can see ROAS, we can see all of those things, and they're 1 + 1 = 2. But where's the insights? Where's the stuff that's inside of that that we can make some decisions on, whether it's at a market level, whether it's at a retailer level. So yes, tons of data, a lot more than we ever had. Making sure we're really clear on what those KPIs are would be the second thing. And then, a little bit beyond that, put some insights to it. Understand what all this means and help clients understand what all these ones and zeros mean to them and to their brand.
And Alexander's coming into the Q&A with the hot question, which is, what about cross RMN measurement? How do we combine them all together, all those zeros and ones together? Steve or Parvs?
Well, I think so. How I would, there are some brands figuring this out right now, and there's ways in which the RMN can definitely help. So we believe in transparency, and we believe in giving brands the data that they need in order to provide and build that cross RMN, cross channel measurement solution. Because we also believe that CMX will not only drive value and growth for your brand at CVS, because we have the best signals in the market and we really understand our consumers, but we also believe that there is an opportunity for CMX to drive the total market, rest of market. So MMMs from some of the more sophisticated brands are definitely measuring that across total market. The MMM has to be set up in the right way. The data feed needs to be set up in the right way, so the inputs are driving the best outcomes in conjunction with what the brand wants to achieve. I think there are other folks as well, right? Like there are some independents in the market as well that can provide that purview on total market. Sakana is one of those, right? There are others in the marketplace as well that are looking to provide total market, rest of market analysis. So I think it's really, you know, where you feel most comfortable, where does your partnership lie as a brand? You know, where have you done the work around measurement methodology and leaning into a certain partner? But the reality is that the RMN should really be providing the right kind of inputs into ensuring that you can provide that total market measurement.
What about your perspective, Steve?
You know, I agree. There has been work on trying to understand the total picture now going on probably 18 months. It takes a long time. It takes a while to get to understand, you know, the right approach that works for and the right inputs that are required to get that sort of reporting back to you. You know, I think I don't have a lot to build on what Parbs said. What I will say is that from a standardization standpoint, and I know he's working with brands to be able to sort of lay a foundation for what a handful, baby steps, 3 or 4 metrics, anything that can be standardized at a very basic level to begin the process. Remember, we're at point 0 right now with standardization for the most part. It may be a slight exaggeration, but for the most part, we're at near 0. It's really difficult to understand RMN1 versus RMN2 and what that investment looks like. And ultimately, from a brand or an agency standpoint, you are trying to bring back what that optimal mix looks like. And at the end of the day, quite frankly, the retailers with the highest quality data are most likely going to be the winners. But we don't know that for sure yet. But that's sort of where the hypothesis is today.
Amazing. Well, final thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Maybe if I can get each of you to do a 1-sentence summary on what you think the future of CTV and retail media looks like. Let's do reverse order from the last question. So Steve, Parbs, Todd.
So I'm first. One
Yeah,
sentence.
sorry.
Push your retail media networks for progress.
Yeah.
They need it.
Parbs.
Oh, 1 sentence. You know, I don't talk in 1 sentences. Not all retail media is created equal.
And Todd, finish us up.
Oh,
Oh,
am I there?
Yeah.
you're great, but then I got a new question. So
You can go to the question if you want.
I think this one may be challenging for this group because it is Africa specific. So please ignore my interruption. I just use it as more buying time to do your one sentence.
As an agency, I would say the 1 sentence would be excited to be a student of all of this. Best thing I can say.
I love those answers. Adiello, we may need to follow up offline with you, but thank you, panelists. This was an incredibly interesting conversation, at least for me. I hope that our attendees enjoyed it, and I believe the recording will be available as well. Have a wonderful rest of your Tuesday.
All right, take care.